All right. Welcome back, everyone, to a Thanksgiving edition of the ILBATDs podcast. We're down to a two-man crew this week. The commish is no longer with us for 1 week only. But I am rejoined by the defending champ, Cam. Good to have you on the pod again.
Oh, it's great to be here.
And we will, in the Thanksgiving spirit, we will keep this nice and short and get back to the Thanksgiving festivities heading into 3 games tomorrow. That'll be exciting. We're going to do a modified format. We're just going to kind of at a high level touch on the games from this past week and then touch on other notes heading into the final week of the regular season here. Season has flown by. Obviously a largest deficit this week was myself against the commish. Glad he's not here to rub that in my face. It was projected to be a relatively close one and did not turn out that way. My team absolutely did not show up. And Colin was the high scorer of the week. Pretty crazy there.
Yeah, this game, along with a couple others, had pretty big implications on the current week's seeding. Obviously not so much for Colin. He did close the gap with him and Josh as far as the 1 and 2 seed goes. As somebody who is behind Nick in the standings and is unfortunately still behind Nick in the standings, I was a little bit happy to see that he was getting the L, but fortunately I didn't do enough myself in that regard. And there were some other teams who did make some moves. So tough loss. Colin still seems to somehow be getting into better form. I don't quite understand. I mean, dropping 150 at this time of the year is very for folks who are in that 7-8 spot who might first round. So I don't know. He's continued to have the total reversal of last year and kicking into high gear.
Yeah, he's on the longest win streak actively in the league too. So definitely going to be a dangerous opposition in the playoffs. Rob versus Willie. We thought this one heading in was probably going to be a dead rubber match between two teams fighting for toilet bowl position. It seems that is the case. Unfortunately, both teams eliminated at this point. But Rob's team gave it a good effort. He got the win and I think beat the median as well. He did beat the median as well. So good 2-0 week.
Yeah.
I think I lost you, Cam.
I don't know. I think I lost you for a second. Can you hear me? What just happened? This. What?
Sorry about that. Let me pull back up the share screen. I have no idea how that's going to look when we go to upload this, but
I think it's just going to be my face looking at the camera for about 2 minutes.
apologies, everyone. I clearly forgot to pay my internet bill this month. But we're back online. Cam, you were saying about Rob and Willie's matchup here.
Yeah, so Rob is still technically not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. He still needs a couple of things to go his way. He needs to win both of his games next week. He needs some help from Troy losing both of his games. And he also needs to outscore Troy by, I think it's about 70 to 80 points. So it's an uphill battle, but he's still technically alive. This is obviously a must-win scenario for him. It was a must-win scenario for Willie as well. But I guess still technically alive in his own personal playoffs as of right now.
Next one, Josh with a big win over Alex. Keep pace, as you mentioned earlier, with Colin for the 1 seed. My note on this is Alex is still like playing 500 ball basically since week 5. I mean, I know he, at least in the head-to-head matchups, rather. So I know he, is eliminated and is going to go into the regular season in all likelihood with the 12 seed, into the playoffs rather with the 12 seed. But he's still playing better. Not his best week, clearly. I think low point total of the week. But we've seen before that just because you're the 12 seed doesn't necessarily mean you're the toilet bowl winner. So it'll be interesting to see how he fares in the playoffs.
Yeah, and we actually have seen a little spike in activity from him on the waiver wires over past week. It's not lost on me that the increase in activity could be attributed to, or the better outcomes in the games could be attributed to higher activity. I hope he continues that in the toilet bowl. I would love to not see him take the SAT or be relegated from this league in future seasons. And Josh keeps doing what Josh does. Still overperformed even at a 125 projection. It's gonna come down to the last week to see if he gets the 1 or the 2 spot. I'm really hoping that I am not in a 7 or 8 spot because I don't want to play either one of these teams. Josh, I think right now is 10-1 against the median this year, which is absolutely insane. Unfortunately, had a couple of matchups where a couple high scores played against him, but it's got to be at least in the median, in the highest clip as far as regular season winning percentage against the median. So that's great.
And the next one, a relatively close matchup and relatively high scoring matchup for this week. Troy's bad luck continues, unfortunately, just losing to the median and, a slightly more considerable loss head to head against Eric. I'm sure we'll talk about it. That 8 seed is still up for grabs. My prediction was that Troy's going to miss out. He plays me this week. I think Troy's going to get in. I don't think Troy's going to end up missing out. But kind of crazy that with the luck he's had that it's come down to this.
Yeah, and they both just participated in trade last week, and there were already some pretty substantial impacts to both sides of that trade as far as players who were traded, right? I think Troy ended up shipping off Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp obviously gets hurt, right? And then it's tough because you make that trade with the playoffs in mind and kind of trying to get deep, to build your the depth in your depth chart. It's unfortunate that Troy's yet again on the unlucky side of these medians and breaks, and also it took Rob, who kind of came out of nowhere, dropped 40 points on Monday night to snipe the median away from him. So that's tough. Fantasy football is a fickle game, emotional, and especially when you see those projections, right? Troy was projected to win by about 16, 17 points. And of course, Eric very much outperforms his projection. So, and this could very well end up being, depending on what happens in the next couple of weeks, a matchup that we see in the playoffs as well. So hopefully Eric is not as hot as he currently is.
Yeah. Next one, important one for seeding, as you alluded to earlier, especially with my team having a bad week. A win for you would have likely put you in front of me here for the 6 seed, and just not able to get it done against a very hot Jason team that's kind of solidified that 4 seed now.
Yeah. I think this is kind of a week to put up or shut up for both teams. I mean, Jason has pretty much been solidified in that 4 seed for quite some time until this last week. where there's a chance for some movement. Fortunately, he escaped that. I had been on a little bit of a roll to kind of get my way back up into the 5 to 6 seed area. And this was a week where I just didn't show up. I finally get some good performance out of my quarterback this week. Trevor Lawrence drops 32. I have a goose egg from Gabe Davis. And, unfortunately, Kenneth Walker goes down with an injury. I don't get a full game out of him. I thought that come Monday night that I would have a chance to at least stay somewhat in the loop, but AJ Brown also had a pretty bad game. I would have needed probably about 25, 26 more points out of him, which is not impossible. I was kind of holding out hope, but especially with a high scoring game, with high flying offenses like the Eagles and the Chiefs. But script didn't go as planned, and I would have loved to at least beat the median on this one too. Then it would have made it a little more competitive with Trevor, who's skyrocketing up the standings right now. But live to see another week. I still going to try to do the best that I can next week with the game to see if I can at least. I think the 4 seed is out of contention for me, but maybe try to get up to the 5 if possible. But shall see.
Yeah, and then I know Colin is on the longest win streak, but it feels like there's no team that's hotter than Trevor right now. He's on the second longest win streak and is just putting up massive points over the last few weeks. So a team that's clicking on all cylinders here and probably put the last nail in the coffin of Johnny, although he's still mathematically in it as well. Tough to see a promising Johnny squad not make the playoffs in all likelihood. But yeah, Trevor is peaking at the right time, 5 straight to get back to 500 here.
Yeah, absolutely. A team that we kind of thought we had questions about in the middle of the season, had questions about his depth at draft time. We had questions about, was he kind of fall apart with the way that he drafted? Just really turned it on. Really not with that much help from Travis Kelce, his number one pick in the first round. So he has definitely made the right moves on the waiver wire, and he's just been on a tear. And fortunately, Johnny is also still not totally eliminated from the playoffs, but he like Rob has a lot of work to do in order to secure that last spot. So all of a sudden, Trevor is one of those teams that I really don't want to face come week 13. And hopefully I don't, because he seems to be kicking into high gear right now.
Yeah. So quick look at waiver wire and free agency. Rob's bad luck with running backs, and it just continues. This might be the pinnacle of it, though. Spending $13 on someone here who's out for the season. Just tough news. You hate to see that from a good young man. Isaiah Likely, $12. I feel like that's probably an overpay for a tight end, but especially because I know he popped a little bit towards the end of last season, but he really hasn't done much this year. And they've got a new offensive coordinator. I don't know that he kind of steps right in and fills all the production that Mark Andrews had. So we'll see. That could be a make or break move, for a team that's obviously going to be hosting a playoff round, so to speak. A lot of other small dollar acquisitions here, which was interesting. Baker Mayfield finds another home. He was with my team earlier this season, so good to see him back on the roster here. But overall, relatively quiet, only 7 waiver wire acquisitions.
Yeah, I've noticed that over the past couple of weeks. There was a couple of weeks in the beginning of the season, maybe through weeks 2 through 5, and maybe even weeks 1 through 5, where there was like every week, maybe attributed to injury or one reason or another, somebody pops off. But there was usually a pretty high trending guy who was like, all right, we're going to probably see 20, $25 drop on this guy. And we usually did. I feel like over the last couple of weeks, we haven't really seen a player come available that kind of fills that role. And actually, there might have been some that we were high on, particularly Rob, because I know that he's dropped probably $70 to $80 in fab on running backs who might have the opportunity to pop, and they just don't. It's ironic that he dropped Chase Edmonds out of all people, just spent like $25 on last or 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it's interesting. And this, I like to see folks like Baker Mayfield who have traveled around amongst teams on fantasy during the fantasy season. He was added by Trevor in September. Then he was dropped that same day, actually, by Trevor. And then he was added in October by Troy, picked up by waivers right before Halloween by Nick, dropped 2 weeks later, and then he was added by Troy's team again for $4. So Troy has some question marks at quarterback, of course, with Joe Burrow being out and Josh Dobbs not really playing that well this last week. So I mean, get it how take it how you can get it. I don't know if Baker Mayfield is somebody who's going to be plugging in immediately, but I guess they still have something to play for in that division. So he might end up being a nice ad for only $4. Can you hear me now? Oh, if you're still here with us, cheers. I can hear you, but I think you're muted.
Am I muted still?
Now, just a little bit quiet.
Interesting.
There we go. I can hear you
now. Okay, cool. Slowly coming back online. Computer's trying to tell me to wrap this up.
All right. It gave me an opportunity to have an intimate conversation with the folks watching just by myself. Yeah. So, I mean, we can get into a little bit of the live look at the playoffs. 7 teams have officially staked their claim as going to the playoffs. The 8 seed is still up for grabs, obviously. I don't know. I'll talk about the bubble if you want to talk about some of the other folks and where seeding currently. Troy has not secured his spot yet, unfortunately, losing to the median at the very end on Monday night. He's still, like I said, Willie and Alex have officially been eliminated after this week. Johnny 3 and Rob still have some work to do. They still have a chance. They just need Troy to lose both these games to Nick, and they both need to win their games as well. If we look at the total points for Johnny's still about 79 or 80 points behind Troy, and so is Rob by 82 or 83 behind Troy. So not only do they need to win both their games and Troy lose both their games, but they need to score Troy by that amount to break the tiebreaker.
I will say one piece of bad news for Troy is, despite the fact that Sleeper says his team is projected to score more points than me, it also somehow gives me a 95% chance to win. So Sleeper clearly is clued into Troy's meltdowns of past weeks and knows that despite the fact that he has the higher projection, there's only a 5% chance he wins.
The analytics team at Sleeper has actually baked in the luck factor as part of their projections.
That's right.
And to win. So they know that even though Troy's probably going to score more, he's still probably going to lose.
one of the rare times where you score more than the opponent and lose.
Yeah, it's interesting. Johnny and Rob have had pretty different, well, I wouldn't say different, pretty similar paths to the playoffs so far this year, both kind of wallowing, in the bottom 4 seeds. But happy to see they're both, pretty valiant coaches, and they have, they've both been in the league for a long time. Both have won a championship in this league. They both know how to close the deal when it gets close to time. I don't personally think that they have enough to get in. I mean, I don't doubt that Troy could lose both of those games this week, but that 80-point gap is just really hard to overcome. And I think Troy's projected to get at least 100 this. So, barring any sort of meltdown, I don't think enough though for Johnny and Rob to get over the hurdle.
Yeah, I think looking at if the playoff matchups, if current results hold, there's some interesting storylines here, right? So you have Josh versus Troy in the first round. Obviously, the trades that they've made or not made. Interesting that they would be paired up. 2 of the podcast hosts, and Colin versus Cam. Myself and Eric, both in year 2, either in the league or back in the league. And then 2 of the quieter members of our group chat, in Jason and Trevor. And probably I would say the 2 members of the league, maybe other than Eric, that know the fewest people or have met the fewest people in person in the league. So just some interesting storylines if current projections hold.
Yeah, this would be a really awesome storyline. Interesting to see. I mean, just based on, we have 1 week left, right? So there's not a lot of movement between seeds, but Shine or Shade, just based off of the matchups that we see for next week, Shine or Shade, the way that the playoffs shaping out right now with the seeding 1 through 8, that's how the seeding will finish at the end of next week.
I'm gonna shade it because my team has been disappointing me the last couple weeks, and I'm like gun shy now. I feel like I'm in for another disappointment. Like I feel like we're heading in the wrong direction. Um, so I think you're gonna pit me for the 6th seed, and I'll finish in 7th. I mean, you could certainly see like myself or Trevor flipping or a flip at the top two, but I think the rest are gonna hold. I think Josh is strong enough to hold on to the 1 seed, and I think Trevor's going to continue to play his way into the 5 seed.
As he was kind of flirting, you and I are 7 right now. Do you have a preference as to if you would rather play Colin or rather play Eric?
That's tough. They're both, I mean, they're not really. I think maybe over 2 weeks, I'd rather play Eric. But I mean, no, not really. I think I'm an underdog either way. So it is what it is. Honestly, I think I'd maybe rather play Eric than Jason. That might be my hot take for this podcast. But I know we talked about Jason's team getting healthy at the right time and having guys like Kamara and Taylor who missed the first few weeks and Jefferson coming back. So I mean that's going to be a really tough team to beat in the playoffs. I'd probably want to avoid the 5 seed if I can, so I avoid playing Jason.
If we could just quickly flip to the bracket view, does that show
Yes.
on
I think it does. Yeah.
Let's just see what that side bracket looks like. So you got on the top, you got Josh, Troy, and Trevor. On the bottom, you got Eric, Nick, Colin, and myself. I don't know which side of the bracket is scarier. I will say that the bottom 3 or the bottom side of the bracket as typically I would call it like the blue blood side of the bracket, like teams that have been historically pretty good for a long time. The upper half is obviously Trevor, who's back in the league this year for the first time. Jason, who has won a championship, but was quiet last year. Troy, who's been historically unlucky and still looking for his first ship. And Josh, who historically is disappointed in the playoffs after having a really strong regular season. So I'm a student of the game through and through. So I think I generally prefer watching blue blood matchups, kind of go ahead and see who prevails. But still, I mean, you got a really hot team and Trevor up top. I feel like, when the playoffs start, it's a new season for Josh, regardless of how good he did in the regular season. So I'm really interested to see if this is that storyline, if this is how the teams actually play out, who comes away victor. Because either way, the winner of the Jason Trevor game, I think, is still going to be pretty well equipped to beat the winner of the Troy and Josh game.
Yeah, my hot take is I'll say the winner of Jason Trevor makes it to the championship.
Okay.
I think they upset the winner of Josh Troy. Who do you think is the kind of top 4 seed that's most likely to lose in the first round? If these are the matchups, yeah. Let's assume these are the matchups.
Right. I don't know what's going on in Minnesota with Justin Jefferson. I know he's on IR right now. I'm not sure when he's going to be back. I think if he doesn't play for the course of 2 weeks, that could be a really, really big detriment for especially playing Trevor, who we've seen can pop off for 170, 180 in any given week. I don't know if Trevor, I don't love Trevor's depth, but when his starting lineup is clicking really well, I would have to say probably Jason, because we've seen Josh and Colin do it all year. Although my hot take, even though it's not really, Josh can be a bit of a fraud. So I'm going to say Jason with the condition that Justin Jefferson doesn't come. If JJ comes back, I'm going to say it's Josh.
Yeah. That's an interesting perspective for sure. I'm excited. I'm glad to be back in the playoffs. Missed it last year in year 1 back in the league. Excited to participate in the postseason. It's gonna be fun. Anything else you want to touch on before we head into week 12 here?
I'm just excited. There's still a lot of different ways this can shake out with how tight it is from seeds 4 through seeds 9. So I don't expect Johnny or Rob to pip Troy for that 8 seed. If that happens, I think that Josh's path to the playoffs or to the championship gets a lot clearer. So I think as it stands right now, that's, Troy is, I think, the biggest hurdle between the three of them for Josh in the first round.
Yeah. Well, good luck to everybody in week 12. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Go Packers, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, guys. Awesome.